It was a scene that no one in this small coastal town had ever witnessed. Shoes, thousands of them, spread across the sandy shore for miles and miles. The town had been buzzing for days about the 2 shipping containers filled with shoes that were lost overboard during an apparent fierce storm. But nobody seemed to notice that another item was also discarded with these shoes. Woman finds briefcase on beach. Then she takes a look inside. A small, unassuming briefcase had also made it to land. In it was a massive secret waiting to be found. Thousands rushed to the sandy shores, hoping to find a free pair of high-end sneakers that matched their size. Clara, the woman who would soon make the discovery of a lifetime, was no different. She stood among rubber soles and loose shoelaces, hoping to find something valuable. Kara had heard the stories and seen the posts online, and the idea of finding something valuable without paying for it was too tempting to resist. Besides, she had the day off, and a treasure hunt sounded exhilarating. So, just like all the other searching people, Sarah crouched down and held up the first pair she liked the look of. But her search was about to make an unexpected turn. Children were running around with mismatched sneakers on each foot, adults carrying armfuls of them, inspecting labels, discarding the ones they didn't want. She could hear laughter, chatter, and the soft crunch of sand beneath hurried footsteps. Yet, despite the chaos, Clara was determined to find something special, something others might overlook. Well, she did. Sarah would get more than she bargained for. She scanned the horizon, watching as the tide continued to deposit more shoes from the lost containers. Her eyes darted from one colorful sneaker to the next. Sarah held up multiple pairs but was unable to find a matching pair. Maybe this was pointless. Was she wasting her day off? Was she leaving empty-handed? But then, out of the corner of her eye, Clara suddenly spotted something different. Among the piles of shoes was a flash of metallic gray, a shape that didn't belong. Kara moved quickly, weaving between the scavengers, who apparently paid it no mind. As she drew closer, she realized it was a suitcase. No, not a suitcase. A briefcase. A sleek, silver briefcase standing on top of the sand. Its surface dull amongst the brightly colored shoes. No one else seemed to have noticed it. They were all too distracted by the scattered shoes. Clara hesitated for a moment, glancing around. The beach was still crowded, and even reporters with cameras capturing the weird phenomenon were present. This felt like something she shouldn't take, something that belonged to someone's private belongings. But Clara didn't come all this way for nothing. So Clara knelt and brushed the sand off its surface. The metal of the briefcase was cool under her fingertips. There was no label, no mark to indicate where it had come from or what it contained. She glanced over her shoulder once more before gripping the handle and pulling it free from the sand. The briefcase was heavy, far heavier than she'd expected. "What is in here?" Sarah whispered to herself excitedly. It didn't seem like something a shipping company would pack alongside sneakers. It felt special in a way. Kara's mind raced with possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. Cash documents, valuables, whatever was inside. It had been lost at sea and washed up just for her to find. If it was important, she, of course, would bring it to the authorities. But for now, it was her little secret. Clara's hands trembled slightly and she clutched the briefcase. She could still hear the chatter of people around her, but their voices seemed distant now, like background noise. Her focus was entirely on the object she had found. Clara put one step in front of the other, creating distance from the crowd while trying to appear as casual as possible. Clara kept expecting someone to stop her and ask what she was carrying, but no one did. The crowd remained preoccupied with the shoes, oblivious to her discovery. Clara's car was parked a short distance away, behind the dunes. She reached it with zero trouble and unlocked the door. "Let's get out of here," she said to herself, finally daring to speak in the confines of her locked vehicle. Something about the briefcase captivated Clara. It was as if it had its own story that only Clara could uncover now. She placed it gently on the passenger seat, putting the key into the ignition so she could head home. It was quiet inside Carla's mind for a moment, even though she had no idea what to do next. But that wouldn't last long. The drive home seemed to take forever, and many times Clara would look inside her car mirror to see if someone was following her. But after a 30-mile drive, she managed to enter her suburban home without any interruptions. The briefcase now lay on her kitchen table, almost asking Clara to open it up. "All right, let's get to it," Clara spoke to herself while looking through her drawers for tools. The briefcase had a small padded lock to prevent it from falling open. This was only a minor hindrance, though, since it could easily be pried open with a long Allen wrench by applying lever pressure. So that was precisely what Carla did. She grabbed some wrenches normally used for bicycle maintenance and placed one of them between the lock and the briefcase. With a little bit of elbow grease, Carla managed to open the briefcase. The lock shot away from the object and rattled onto the floor while the top lid of the case flew open, revealing what was inside. The opening gave a loud initial bang, which made Carla jump back for a second. But when she recovered her composure, she eagerly peeked inside to admire her prize. Inside the case was one object, an odd, bulky-looking phone, unlike any model Carla had ever seen. "What is that?" Carla said in a low voice while moving her head closer to it. The phone was matte black and had thick, grippy handles on its side. It almost looked like a large walkie-talkie. But this thing was way more than that, and Carla was about to find out. Carla held the bulky phone. It felt heavier than it looked. She turned it over, trying to find some sort of clue about what it could do. Then she saw a round button on the side. With a hesitant flick, she twisted it, and a series of high-pitched radio frequencies crackled through the air. It sounded like the phone was trying to tune into a signal. The device kept cutting in and out, producing nothing but static noise for a while. For 10 long minutes, Carla fiddled with the device, twisting the dial and trying different settings, but all she heard was that frustrating hiss. She finally sighed and placed the phone on her kitchen counter, disappointed. Maybe it was just broken, or maybe it was something she'd never figured out. She started to walk away, but then she heard it. A voice, faint but clear. "Hello, hello, hello. Is anybody out there?" Carla's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly spun around, rushing to the device. She picked it up and spoke, her voice shaking. "Hello, this is Carla." The line went silent for a second, and then the voice returned, sounding relieved, almost grateful. "Carla, thank God. My name is Benjamin. I need your help." He didn't know who Benjamin was or how he had reached her through this strange phone, but the urgency in his voice made her listen. "Who are you?" she asked. There was a brief pause before he answered, and when he did, his words made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up straight. Benjamin's story made Carla's breath catch, her heart hammering inside her chest. Benjamin's voice grew more desperate as he continued pleading with her. "Please, you have to take this phone to the authorities. Tell them everything I told you. I'm in danger, and you're the only one who can help." Carla hesitated, but something in his voice made her believe him. Carla promised she would help, and after their conversation ended, she carefully put the phone back into the briefcase so she could take it with her. Without hesitation, Carla drove straight to the police station, the briefcase clutched tightly in her hand. She didn't waste any time explaining what had happened. The officers listened intently and were calm and collected at first. But their faces turned serious as she showed them the phone and dialed in the frequency again. The room fell silent when Benjamin's voice crackled through, repeating parts of the story he had told Carla. The officers exchanged looks and immediately started making calls. Benjamin's message was enough to set off alarm bells and make the police take immediate action. The Coast Guard was also called, and a plan was set in motion. Carla was asked to come along on the mission. They wanted her there to help reestablish contact with Benjamin if needed. She agreed, though she felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had never been part of something like this, but felt obligated to help. Her find started this, after all. However, Carla was warned to stay on the ship no matter what happened. She nodded, promising she would. The police and Coast Guard were ready within the hour, and soon they were setting out to sea, the large coastal boat cutting through the waves. Carla stood on deck, the wind whipping her hair, staring at the endless expanse of water and toward Benjamin. 2 hours passed before they reached the coordinates. But then she saw it, a massive ship, just as Benjamin had described. And something was clearly wrong. The ship was listing, slanted in the water at an unnatural angle, and the front dipped down as if struggling to stay afloat. The police and Coast Guard exchanged quick, worried glances, then prepared to board the vessel. They left their talkies on, so that Carla could listen in from the safety of their boat. She gripped the edge of the railing, trying to catch every word as the officers climbed the ladder of the large floating ship. She heard their footsteps clattering up the metal stairs, the sounds of doors creaking open, and then voices, faint but clear, as they called out to the crew on board. As she waited, Carla's mind drifted back to Benjamin's story, the details still fresh in her mind. According to him, they were the ship that had carried the containers full of shoes. But those containers hadn't ended up in the sea by accident. The ship had been on a long journey navigating treacherous waters. The sea was unpredictable, and things only took a moment to go wrong. One of the crew members had been distracted just for a few seconds, but it was enough for them to miss the warning signs on the ship's sonar. They had hit a coral reef, a hidden, jagged structure beneath the waves that tore a hole right through the bottom of their container ship. Water began seeping in, slow at first but steadily enough that they knew they were in serious trouble. It was a slow-motion disaster, almost like something out of a nightmare. They were sinking, and the ship's onboard communication systems had been knocked out by the impact. There was no cell phone reception this far out, no way to call for help. The crew had done everything they could to keep the ship afloat, but they knew they needed more time. They needed a way to signal for help, to let someone know where they were and what had happened. They also needed to stay afloat for as long as possible so help could arrive before they sank. So they made a desperate choice. They began to lighten the load, dropping containers overboard to keep the ship from sinking too fast. One of those containers carried the shoes that had washed up on the shores of Carla's town, but there was something else. A waterproof briefcase with a satellite phone tucked inside. It had been Benjamin's idea, a last-ditch effort to reach out to the world beyond the ocean. He hoped that someone would find the briefcase, find the phone, and get help. And that was exactly what had happened. Carla had found it, and now she was here, waiting, hoping that everything would turn out okay. Carla stared out at the slanted ship, trying to imagine what it must have been like for them, stranded out there with no way to call for help. She listened as the officers' voices came through the talkie, crackling and echoing in the open air. They were moving through the ship, calling for any sign of life. For half an hour, Carla could do nothing but stand there, gripping the railing, her heart pounding with every step she heard on the line. And then there was a breakthrough. She could see them now, small figures appearing on the deck of the large ship, waving, calling down to the Coast Guard that was still on board with Carla. Slowly, they began to descend the ladder one by one. The crew members climbed down toward the Coast Guard boat where Carla was waiting. She held her breath, watching as the first of the crew members reached the bottom, their faces pale but relieved, a faint smile breaking through as he stepped onto the boat. More figures followed, their faces tired but thankful. Carla felt a surge of relief. The rescued crew members were brought on board the Coast Guard vessel, shivering and visibly shaken but safe. As each of them stepped off the ladder, officers greeted them, wrapping them in warm blankets and offering comforting words. Carla stood to the side, her heart still racing. She had listened to every moment of their rescue, but now, seeing the relief on their faces made it all feel real. When Benjamin finally emerged, Carla immediately knew it was him. His eyes scanned the deck until they locked onto hers, and in that moment, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. He walked over to her, his steps unsteady, but his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Benjamin pulled Carla into a tight embrace without saying a word, holding her as if she were a lifeline. "You have no idea how much I prayed someone would find that briefcase," Benjamin whispered, his voice breaking. Carla could feel the warmth of his relief as he tightened his arms around her. She hugged him back just as tightly, her own eyes welling with tears. "I'm just glad I was there," she whispered, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. As the Coast Guard vessel returned to the shore, the crew members began sharing their stories with the officers. They talked about the storm, the coral reef, and their desperate decision to throw containers overboard. Listening to them, Carla realized just how close they had come to a far worse fate. She looked at Benjamin, who was now speaking with an officer, his expression serious but calm. The journey back to the harbor felt much faster than the ride out to the ship. Once they arrived, ambulances were waiting to take the crew members to the hospital for checkups. Carla watched as Benjamin and the others were helped into the vehicles, grateful to get the care they needed. She wanted to stay to ensure everything went smoothly, but an officer assured her they had everything under control. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. News spread quickly about the rescue, and Carla was contacted by reporters who wanted to hear her side of the story. But the real relief came when she received a call from Benjamin, letting her know that he and the crew were recovering well in the hospital. They had been exhausted and dehydrated, but otherwise fine. A week later, Carla was invited to visit the hospital. She was unsure of what to say or how to act, but as soon as she saw Benjamin's smile, all her doubts disappeared. They talked for hours, sharing stories of what had happened on the ship and what it was like for Carla to find the briefcase that led to his rescue. "Thank you, Carla," he said, his voice sincere. "You didn't just find a phone. You found hope when we thought there was none left." Carla felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that Benjamin's words meant more than just gratitude. They were the beginning of something new, a bond forged in a moment of desperation. There was friendship here. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to salvage the ship. Divers and cranes were brought in, working tirelessly to secure the vessel and recover the remaining goods from the icy water. It took weeks, but slowly, the containers were lifted out of the water, revealing shoes, machinery, and other cargo that had been left behind. The success of the salvage operation brought a sense of closure to the entire ordeal. As Benjamin recovered, he and Carla continued to keep in touch. What began as short phone calls turned into long conversations about life, their dreams, and even their fears. There was an ease between them, a natural connection neither had expected. Carla learned that Benjamin was originally from a small town, not unlike hers, and that he had a deep love for the sea, despite everything he had been through. When the last container was retrieved and the operation was successful, the ship was towed back to a port. Carla was invited to join the crew and officials at a small gathering to mark the end of the salvage mission. Standing at the dock, she watched as the damaged ship slowly made its way to safety, feeling a sense of finality wash over her. Afterward, Benjamin approached her with a smile. "So, what's next?" he asked, his tone playful but curious. Carla laughed, thinking about how much had changed since the day she found that briefcase. "I guess we'll see," she replied. "But whatever it is, I'm glad you're part of it." Benjamin's smile widened, and he reached out to squeeze her hand, a silent promise of friendship. In the months that followed, Carla and Benjamin's friendship blossomed. They met regularly, sometimes just for a coffee, other times for long walks along the beach. They talked about everything from their families to their work, but also about that fateful day and how it had brought them together. For both of them, it was a reminder of the unexpected ways life could change in an instant. Benjamin eventually returned to his life at sea, but he and Carla stayed in touch. Whenever his ship docked nearby, he would make sure to visit her. And whenever Carla felt the need for a little adventure, she would join him on short voyages, learning more about the ocean that had once threatened to take his life. Their friendship became a testament to resilience, trust, and the unlikeliest of bonds. Carla and Benjamin's friendship continued to grow, strengthened by their shared experience. Despite the distance, they remained close, always finding time to reconnect. What began as a chance discovery on a crowded beach had led to a bond that neither had anticipated but deeply cherished. Through their unlikely meeting, they had found not just adventure, but a lifelong friendship that felt like a gift from the sea.